Hi, and welcome to today's podcast. Today we have a very special guest, Casey, all the way from Austin, Texas. Casey is a family and marriage therapist. She's a healer, teacher, and a guide in Modern Mystery School. Welcome, Casey.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be talking to you today.
I would love to know a little bit more how your journey actually started. What point in your life and what called you to the journey of self-healing, personal growth? Was that desire always there? How did you find mystery school?
This all took place about maybe 8 years ago, 7, 8 years ago. And I just knew that there was more to experience in life. That I had reached a certain point in life where I felt like I really had it all. I had a good marriage and good friends and we had fun but I could still understand I lacked the freedom because I still had worry. I still didn't feel completely present in all the moments. Like I knew that there was more to go, but I didn't have a lot of people around me who were seeking or had reached a point of what I was looking for. So I just had this intuitive drive to start to search. And as I searched, I experienced, I was just following my intuition and saying yes to opportunities that fit. And I ended up in California going to a conference. And at that conference, it was a conference for psychologists and psychotherapists, psychiatrists. And there was this one woman who was talking about sacred psychology and the idea that therapy was supposed to help the soul. And so with the work of Carl Jung, he was more archetypal and talking about the soul and subconscious and these deeper aspects that some of the more modern approaches to therapy have gotten away from. And her books, she's very prolific in writing, and so I started reading a lot of her books. And in one of them, it said the phrase mystery school. And it just resonated with me and stuck with me. And so I looked it up and then I forgot about it. And then it came in another avenue. But it was, I really ultimately felt like I was being led. And as I started engaging with it, I found that my spectrum of what I thought was possible kept expanding and expanding and expanding. And so I realized there was so much more here. There's so much more to life that was possible that I didn't understand initially. And one thing I always say is I really did think I was living at an 8 out of 10. And now if I look at that scale, it's not even close to what was really going on. And now I have the experience and the humility that tells me like that's probably always the case. So there's always more. And that's certainly what I've felt really driven by and at home with the mystery school.
Amazing. I love that you are trained as a therapist and you are able to help people, from that angle, and then weave also the mystery teachings and have them connect to that spiritual aspect. So working with your clients, would you see that there is actually a gap that it can be filled and united to help people to really embrace greatness? Because from my direct experience, when I was exploring psychology, even though I've understood some things logically, I was still repeating, the same patterns, the same mistakes, like the lessons. I was not able to, learn the life lesson.
Hmm. Absolutely. The mystery school lineage is built on the foundation of Hermetics. And so I bring the Hermetic teachings into all of my sessions, whether it's working with an individual, a family, or a couple. Sharing that wisdom sits with people in a way. And so whenever I share something according to what they're going through, it opens things up. That because it's almost inarguable. And so the approach I take to therapy is much more active. I'm an active participant. I ask a ton of questions. I get to see what their patterns are, and then I help guide and give any sort of insight that I can see or teachings that help unlock some of that pattern that distill maybe that pattern into a really simple solution or correction.
Mm. Amazing, amazing. And being yourself a mom, how did you have a two wonderful, such a sweet little kids. Um, how did the path, or did it, help you navigate motherhood?
Yes, definitely. As they're running around right now. Um, I found the mystery school before I was a mother. And
Oh,
sister, you want this part's about you?
uh, oh,
Um, I found the path before I was a mother, and I'm so happy I did because I ended up healing so many aspects of myself where I wasn't loving to myself. I wasn't healed in a certain aspect. And that's where the transgenerational trauma and the patterns get repeated over and over. And so a big part of my training was in family systems. It's looking at how certain dynamics repeat throughout the generations. And once I healed that in myself, then I could look at my kids and I allowed them to be who they are meant to be. I don't project my own lack onto them. And that makes being a parent really, really clear. Being when I discipline, it feels clearer because I have so much unconditional love flowing. And I think before we get that healing, if we don't really experience unconditional love, like maybe we haven't experienced it from a family member, we haven't experienced it within ourselves. Once we get connected to that energy, the discipline is easier, the boundaries are easier because it's not coming from a shadow, it's coming from a higher order. And so there's been times where I have to reconcile, I do get into the same patterns that a lot of parents do, a lot of moms particularly, where they want to prioritize the kids over everything else. And that tendency is very, very human. I gave a lot of advice before I was a parent, and then I became a parent and realized, oh, it's very, very hard, very, very hard to take care of yourself. But when I prioritize my soul care, like I talk about my soul care and my spiritual care, that has an effect that bleeds over into every other aspect. And that makes me more effective getting the house things done, being loving, all the things. So it really, I think, expands your container to be able to be a better mother. But it does require that short-term sacrifice in order to really prioritize. And my study and my meditation and traveling and learning and all of that does take time, but after the fact I feel like so much more of myself.
mm. That's so amazing because I can see that I recognize it within myself in my journey how the self-love was so important to prioritize myself because we really cannot give from the empty space, and I can see how that really touches mostly or quite a lot women. So that self-care as a woman, it's so important. Is there something that you could share as maybe struggling mothers? Um, and in a way, I don't think that only touches a mother. I think sometimes women can be flowing from that energy of giving, 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 even way before of having kids
Hmm. Hmm.
themselves thin, either at work or friendships, relationships, taking on a lot and losing that joy, losing that softness, and that love that we here to share.
Hmm. Hmm.
Is
Yes, I think from my experience, the tendency to overgive is very common in most women that I work with. Um, I think that a lot of women I work with, or I know a lot of women I work with, tend to be very high achieving and they care about being really productive and they put their value outside of themselves. So what rather feeling valuable just from their beingness, it's become action oriented and production oriented. And so, yes, I completely agree that motherhood can magnify that pattern if it's there. Like very, very much so. But it's in most women that I see. I don't see a lot of women who don't feel this incessant need to always be giving.
Mm. And in a way, how important it is to really heal that, because I know from my experience when I was, giving, 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 and trying to get approval from external, like I'm successful, I'm doing it. I was more in my masculine. I was more. I've lost that softness. I've lost the love and the flow of the woman. And it was not fun. I myself didn't enjoy that. I didn't.
Mhm.
What would be the advice you will give to someone who recognize that within themselves to start shifting, to start coming back home to themselves and start recognizing their beauty and goodness from within? So, is there any baby steps someone could take?
I think the simplest start would be to really reflect to yourself daily, what do I want or need right now? If you get into the habit of asking yourself that question, then say, you have a really busy day at work and someone at work asks you to do something that's a little outside of your purview, but you feel like you need to give. If you ask yourself, do I have the capacity to give more? Do I want to give more? Do I need to give more? Those are those little momentary changes that can have such a big impact. And so if your compass is then not just give, give, give for the sake because someone's asking, and then they become reliant on you, and then all sorts of habits start from there. And you just reflect. And, sometimes we can have a really hard time letting someone down or disappointing someone or feeling like we've made a situation harder on someone because we've said no. We need to give ourselves the opportunity to have the direct experience of saying yes to ourselves and no to someone else. And as we do that, we start to realize they figured it out, or it's okay, they understood, or that it wasn't as bad as we thought when we say no, and that we end up feeling more loving, more connected to ourselves, and more in tuned with ourselves. So oftentimes, our thought process is to say yes. And so just asking that question is one of the simplest, one of the first, and I think one of the most impactful things that we can always come back to.
Amazing, amazing. In a way, choosing yourself before you support others,
Hmm.
serving and helping from the full cup. I love that.
Yes.
Um, do you think those patterns that we carry, um, are they often rooted in the inner child? Because in a way, in everything that we do for the healing process, we want to come to this, mature, confident, authentic, best version of ourselves. But sometimes we are grown up in our physical body, but yet maybe our emotional mental state is not the same age. So how are those patterns are linked to our inner child?
I think many of those patterns do start in childhood. It's similar to our bodies. So if we break a bone really early on and it's not completely rehabilitated, then usually there's a misalignment in our body in some way. And the same happens mentally and emotionally. And so, yes, we learn through absorption and observation. If we see parents relate to each other in a certain way, we see what mom does and how she gets along in the world, and what dad does and he does this. We're soaking all of that up. So we're really we're just energetic sponges, and we learn. And oftentimes, we're learning in such a pure state and so much at once. Like, how how much our neurological system is pruned and rewired and molded at the beginning is incredible. And we tend to replicate what we see. That's a big thing that people talk about with parenting. Kids won't do what you say, kids do what you do. And so if we're viewing things, and kids are so perceptive too, they're picking up on things way more. There's studies that show if the parents are fighting in the household a lot, even if they're fighting away from the children, if you test the cortisol in the children, they're much higher. So they're picking up on that energy regardless of seeing it directly face to face because they're sponges. And so I can always, yes, I always like to think about this idea of patterns and really re-engineering the patterns. We don't have to solve what happened. It's just really good to see, oh, this pattern began because of this stimulus. And if this stimulus wasn't here, you most likely wouldn't have that pattern. And so it's moldable, it's pliable. And I think it's ultimately a really empowering way to look at our childhood and our inner child because we can look at it from a view of we still have the power to change this. We can confront what's not working. We can change that habit. We can, oftentimes deeper healing is needed. Aspects of the mind can kind of get cemented in some ways, but it doesn't mean there's not tools to, jackhammer it. So that's, I think, where a lot of the lineage tools come in when I can't get through to someone's mind and they're not allowing the pattern to shift, then I bring in specific healings and tools that help make it more moldable.
Amazing. That actually was, I wanted to ask the next question, how that actually healing inner child is one thing, and getting deeper clarity in our mind, reparenting ourselves, and bring the correct perspective on life. But actually, that journey to truly know ourselves, like I really like when you shared at the beginning about the soul. Was it the soul psychology or
Yeah, sacred psychology.
psychology? I love how does this open, the connection to our soul and spirit, and actually knowing ourselves on this grander version? Because I think sometimes we can also get in this kind of rabbit hole when we just constantly trying to fix ourselves and trying to focus on what is not right versus redirecting the attention into grander vision. It's like, okay, but who am I? What's my gifts? What's my beauty? And I love how the lineage actually redirects our attention to getting to know ourselves and live more empowered life, and actually creates that excitement to know, you know, what else is possible? Who am I? What else can I create? Is there a balance that you would recommend? Like how long does one actually tries to look inside to heal the inner child? What would be the, you know, correct? Maybe that's not the right word, but like advisable maybe approach, because yes, we have to address the inner child, but is the addressing inner child or healing, is that enough?
I think everyone's very different in the ways in which healing works for them. Some people it goes more tangible and concrete, and then it goes higher. And some people like to bounce all over the place. One tendency can be when therapists or healers or coaches stay too much in the past. I think that can be it can be very limiting and it can kind of work against the whole process. So what I like to do is have the vision. And as we grow and we heal, our vision becomes greater. I mean, I remember several years ago, I had this grand vision of my life, and I thought it was going to be my grand vision, like years down the road. And when I figured out that vision, I could create it really quickly. And you access the fact and the knowing that you're very powerful, that your mind is very powerful and can go in the direction of what you want if you're very disciplined with it. But also, my life has changed and the vision of my life has changed depending on how connected I feel back to myself. So there's no linear path to healing. And I always like to take a step back with my clients and I just like to ask them questions. And I start to see what do they like to talk about? What's bothering them the most? When do they have the most emotion come up? And I start to see what might need to be the focus of either the healing or what the direction is, what the trajectory is for them to move forward.
We touched a little bit on that subject, that how important it is for us to look after ourselves. Would you have some tips for women to how to navigate throughout the day, this saying yes and no? But is there any other self-loving um, maybe things to do, or changing the thought patterns, or embracing themselves? Like, what would be the way to start taking care of ourselves as a woman, either as a mother or someone who still doesn't have a kids, but have that feel that, oh, I'm running on empty, my batteries are quite low, I don't know how to navigate through life.
It stems from that first question, which is what do I need? What do I want? You could go further and say what would best serve me now. And then it's doing it. So part of that might be saying no, like I've already discussed. But part of it is recognizing, okay, I need a little more sleep tonight, or I want to go out with friends, or I want to treat myself to a pair of shoes. It can be anything. Um, the things that are process focused, so not outcome based, process focused. And I'll talk to clients about their nighttime routine. When they're washing their face, are they rushing or they feel like they have to get it done really fast? Instead, just sitting and enjoying taking care of yourself. That's part of an embodiment practice where you're actually treating yourself in a way and you're moving through your world in a way that is more graceful and beautiful. And so it's not about the vanity piece. It's more about when we don't feel valuable or lovable, then we move through the world very different. Our body language is different. How we walk is very different. And so being able to be really intentional in some of those things. So creating time and space for ourselves, firstly, exercising, meditating, art, creation, like it can be so many things. And everyone is again a little different on what's best for them. When I have a really tight schedule and I don't have a lot of time to give myself, I know what I'm going to put the most focus in on is exercise. That is what feeds me the most efficient throughout the day. And then I add on, then it's the spiritual and the soul, and those are really important to me. Um, if we can't give ourselves time and space to do what we want, then we are telling ourselves on some level that we don't matter.
Mm.
So you have to give yourself some time and space. And if you're so busy that your schedule is so crazy, to me that tells me that you care about what other people think more than you care about your own needs.
That's such a great reminder. Such a great reminder. And I love what you pointed out, that it's almost not about ticking like, oh, I did this for myself and this for myself, but actually, how did I do it? How embodied and present was I? Did I do it to nurture myself, or did I do it just to tick, okay, I've done it, let's rush to the next thing?
Exactly. Hmm. Hmm.
Amazing. Oh, it's such a pleasure to chat. I know we almost running out of time. Is there any last tip you would recommend to someone who's seeking a change in life?
would say if someone is seeking a change, then find the people who seem like they have something you want. When I first got started, and this was even before the mystery school, I only worked with people who felt a way that it wasn't just their knowledge, it wasn't their training and their abilities, but this first woman that really was a catalyst in changing my life, the amount of joy she had was very apparent. And she was so wise and joyful. And I think that spoke to my soul in a different way. And so, if you're a woman seeking to love yourself, then work with someone who seems like they love themselves. You know, there can be a lot of illusion and people can say a lot of things, but I do think it's very different when you sit with a woman who seems embodied, who feels connected to herself and balanced versus not. And that can be kind of your compass. And sometimes you don't really know what you want, and you look around your friend group, look around your circle, and see, does anyone seem to have that thing that I'm looking for? And then be open because there's so many opportunities, there's so many ways in which spirit can guide us. And so be open. I really got started with a chance Facebook invite that I actually looked at, which I never look at, and I found, and it was the thing that led me to the next thing. And so pay attention to what you feel when new opportunities come in, and let that be your guidance system.
Amazing. What a wonderful time. Thank you so much for sharing and being with us here.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to be able to talk to you about this. And yeah, it's a topic I'm really passionate about. It's really lovely.